Okay. Oh, that's a good, yes, we will, you will need to share that.
Okay.
And I'm not gonna hand out all these documents yet, because I don't want everybody just getting down in the weeds. And this doesn't have to be is there no formal?
I don't think we do. Yeah, because he's not even here. Where did he go?
All right.
Okay.
You got me up.
You want me to share?
Yeah, go ahead and share.
Do we need to do any intros on the mic for people who are watching?
Good question. I don't. We can just, I think we probably need to do introductions maybe or something, or no, just go ahead and start.
Yeah.
Or just
I
like,
don't,
hey, we're
everybody's
doing,
here because, normally we have a roll call.
just,
Yeah, I don't.
it's instead of roll call and stuff, I just at least preface the video for those maybe watching on YouTube in the future. This is workshop budget,
The workshop, yeah.
workshop budget and budget workshop number 1. And
Right.
we're here to talk budget.
Okay. And I will just let everybody know who's here. We have Councilor Bullenbacher, Councilmember Radilla, Councilmember Marks, Councilmember Polkolnik, and Councilmember and Council President Oliverio. Councilmember Compatello is going to be absent. She is ill. And I think that Councilmember Chandler was supposed to log on, and Mayor Perry is here as well. And this is a first meeting of, this is the first budget meeting introduction. So I'll just get right to it. You should be able to see, if you are watching online, you should be able to see the presentation online. And that didn't work. That's not a good sign.
I think you have to push it to wherever the thing is. Where is
Oh.
the receptor? That's
Oh, I can get it now. That's what it was. If I point that direction, I can do it.
Okay.
Oh, maybe not. Maybe you just moved it. Anyway, so let me just go. The first thing is the draft budget that is created is balanced and has no tax increase. So I'll start there. And these are just the things I'm going to go through. First thing, I'm going to review fund balances and changes that I plan to make there. I'll explain the change in the new DCED numbers. So we basically updated all the numbers, the account numbers. So they're going to be on DCED numbers. There's still some work to be done on that. So some of the documents that I'm going to show tonight are still on the nonprofit numbers that they were on. But I hope to have them all switched over by next meeting. It's just been a Herculean task to get them all updated and rechecked and checked again. So I will update everybody with that. And then I'm going to preview the new budget workbook that we will be able to use at the next budget workshop, but it's not quite ready for prime time because of those number switches, but I'll review that with you. And then I'll give a high level review of the general fund, the sewer fund, the road fund, and the bond fund, which are the 4 major funds that we're operating with currently. And then I'll introduce decision points that are a part of this conversation. You want to move me to the next one? No, it's not. Yep. So I'll have to ask you to move it. Just one. Yep. Okay. So this is the current, these, and now Councilmember Chandler is here as well. And so this is the fund balances for this year. And these are the main funds that we use. We have the general operating account, which is where we write all the checks from. That is a checking account. And you can see that fund hovers around $1 million up and down throughout the year. And typically during this part of the year, we get a little lean because all the taxes have been received and we're still paying out. And by the end of the year, it'll drop down to around $500,000 and then come back up in the new year. The road fund, which is also in a checking account, in the same account as the general fund, I am going to move to an MMX account. That is currently in a checking account, but the MMX is getting about 5.5% higher interest rates than the basic checking account. So I conferred with Huntington and they agreed that's a good move from a profitability standpoint. And so, from an gaining interest standpoint, so I'll be moving that road fund into its own account right now. It's delineated on paper as its own account, which it legally is required to be, but I'm actually going to physically move it into an account that is not a checking account so that it gains higher interest. And then we have and that's the total. Below that is the general operating fund. That's that account that I just mentioned, the checking account, which we basically write everything out of. Petty cash is just that. It's a very small account that we basically have money in the office for small needs. Liquid fuels fund is something that is recorded separately. It's in its own account, but we essentially record it in the general fund, and that money all goes towards things like paving and streetlights. Then we have the SOAR fund below that, and that is the checking fund for the SOAR fund, and that's where we transfer money in and out of when we have money on the budget that we'll talk about later. Crafton Celebrates account was closed, so that is no longer an active account. And then we have two capital reserve accounts. We have the old capital reserve account, which is now just being used to store funding for the fire department for breathing apparatus. So we are going to combine that account with the general fund reserve account because that is currently in a checking account, and we're going to move it to a money max account to also up the amount of interest that we get on that. So we're going to be opening one new MMax account and combining another one. So those are some of the changes that are happening with the accounts. It'll streamline the process a little bit for us, but it's also, I connected with Huntington, and you can see on the right side, the expected interest that we're going to see from all of our accounts has increased significantly. So we're taking advantage of the fact that interest rates are up. You know, it's not good for a lot of things. Obviously, costs have gone up for a lot of things, but in this case, we've been able to maximize and take advantage of those increased interests. So we get $100,000 from the operating fund. Is the general fund is what we're anticipating next year. $4,500 from the liquid fuels account. $47,000 from the SOAR fund reserve, and another $100,000 from the capital bond account. So more than $250,000 in interest. So we're taking advantage of that, and that is recognized in the budget itself as well. Any questions on that before I move on to?
Just as a reminder, where did the Crafton Celebrates money go when we started that account?
It was deposited into the general fund. Thanks for asking. Yep. Okay. Next slide. And this is what we're doing to set up a better trend analysis. Right now, I'm with the draft documents that you're going to see later. I only have a trend of a few years because they're on different numbering systems. So this is the trend from, we will have, once this effort is complete, we will have a trend going back to 2016, and then we will be projecting it forward to 2028 so that people can see not only we balance this year, but in future years, we should be able to stay balanced and in good shape. Not quite there yet, but I wanted to give you a teaser for what that would look like when we get there. I'm going to hit the next slide and then the next slide after that. And this is a preview of what the new budget document will be able to do. So you, even any resident would be able to come in, tell us how much their house is worth, and it'll tell from a property, from a real estate amount, how much, where their tax revenues are going, and where we get them from mainly, and then where the categories and where they're spent at. But we don't have that done yet. And I realize I'm going to have to come over there because the next thing I was going to do was give you a little tour of that. So if you hit the next slide, and I'm going to move. Thank you. So as I mentioned, you'll be able to review where your money is, where the borough is getting money from, and where we are spending it. But again, this hasn't yet been updated with all of the right details, so we'll be working on that very shortly. Or actually, this is updated with it's connected with the 2016 through 21 data, but it doesn't do anything for us on the up-to-date data. The main view will have the taxable property in the borough, the millage rates, and any projected, how they will be affecting projected funds going out. And then we also have a number of things. It'll be calculating exactly what payroll income and costs are. So we'll be able to lock that into the exact amount that we got from insurance companies and all the benefit programs. we're also working on a rolling paving program, which we don't have set yet, but I'm very close to pulling the trigger on hiring a organization that will help us create a 5-year rolling paving program that is actually very inexpensive, much less than the cost of an engineer doing the same work. So we're excited for that opportunity. And then leases will be in here and other data. So this is just a tease for where we'll be going, and we'll be able to look at it a little more efficiently in this new budget workshop workbook. But with that going forward, I just want to give some highlights. So I've already mentioned that we do have a balanced draft budget, and it is no tax increase, but these are a couple of the highlights, the things that have changed. Real estate taxes I've budgeted down fairly significant by close to $80,000, where they were previously over budgeted last year. The same is true for the real estate transfer tax. Was unpredictable, and that has taken a fairly solid downward trend. And so in the budget, you'll see that has taken I think a 30% decrease, just to account for the fact that the rising interest rates have slowed down home sales, and they've slowed down the value of the homes that are being sold.
So what Jim's saying here is, when we're highlighting how over budgeted we were for real estate taxes and the transfer taxes, that means that we expected to collect more than we actually got for the last couple of years. So we're going to try to correct that, so we aren't balancing a budget where we're not getting as much revenue as we expected. So it's better for us to budget for lower revenues and be a little bit low or on the nose if we can be.
Exactly. Yeah. You want to budget expenses on the low side, and you want to budget costs on the high side. That way, when it all works out, you end up with a surplus and not a deficit.
And do you want to say why? Because we figured out why it was over budgeted.
I'm not sure
Was
for
it the vacant properties or the
this is just over budgeted. There wasn't a clear reason.
Mhm.
Yeah, not for that one. For the other one, we know that, I mean, for the real estate transfer tax, we know that it's the increased interest rate.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why real estate taxes were over budgeted.
All here, talking here. I think that John is correct, because I think we have a heavy load. We start with what the reported value is, which includes a pretty heavy load of, vacant, dead owner properties.
Mhm.
And so I think that's just been a trend, because we take whatever it's been, 95% of what the county says our real estate is worth.
Oh, okay.
That's-
So
yeah.
that's,
Yeah, we
That's
should
what
really
we're
be
thinking.
working off of our own past numbers as opposed to
Right.
off of, because
well,
every
I think that's where that started.
Oh, okay.
And we've been neglecting that load of non-revenue properties.
Okay. Yeah, and that's it. We are looking into that as well as an analysis for some of the other things, like how do we capture some of that? And so we are currently looking through all of the data for delinquent taxes and which of those are nonprofit owned or tax exempt, because we have dozens of nonprofit owned property that is not listed as tax exempt. They never went and got the tax exempt. So they're just delinquent. And so that's hurting our bottom line numbers, or it looks like we're worse than we are. The other thing that makes us look a lot worse than we are all the properties, especially down in the valley, that are past owners that have long since passed away and have not been recuperated. So we're going to put those all and classify those all. And so we know that we're never going to see that money. So we actually know what we're actually trying to get, as opposed to just this, because our taxable value is almost $1 million more than what we gain taxes on. So there's, there's a big disconnect there. The account interest I've already mentioned, we're really seeing a fairly significant bump, and that's actually a conservative number. We might see more than that. And then on the expense, so those are income things, and the biggest things on the expense size that have added additional funds, and I'll talk about this when we get to the decision points, are a big one is sewer repairs that were deferred maintenance. They're on an annual basis. a municipality of this side budgets typically about $400,000 for just regular annual repairs to the budget. I mean, to the sewer system. But we have about 400,000 in addition to that of kind of like problem child projects that need to be addressed. One of which, just for an example, was the Johnston Street used to be a problem child. And it wasn't lined when it was first brought up by the borough. And because of that, it ended up changing from $100,000 project to a $300,000 project. So we really want to make sure that we're getting those deferred maintenance projects done up front so that they don't later cost the borough a lot more money. So that's something that we've added a little bit of money in this. I've added a little bit of money in the sewer fund to accommodate more projects this year, $500,000 of projects as opposed to $400,000 in projects to start chipping away at those problem child projects. Municipal property improvements, I have 45K budgeted for that. I'll talk about that in more detail once I get to the actual decision points. New vehicles that are in this budget are the police cruiser, not police cruise, apologize for that, dump truck and skid steer. The dump truck is now more than 10 years old and they really have a useful life of 8 to 10 years. So that is in there. And the skid steer, I've brought up to council, I think it once before, at least the finance committee. And that is, that's a trade out for the one they already have. It would cost the borough about 65,000 with trade in, but it'll be a different skid steer one that will allow us to do more paving. And to clear brush a lot more easily than we are able to do now. And then we have money also for the police chief. Our police chief is retiring at the beginning of 2025. So we'd like to start a search sometime next year to make sure that we have a police chief in place before our current one retires. And then we've also budgeted about $30,000 for overlap with the chief. So just quick overviews of the expenses for the budgets. These are all balanced, so the income matches the expenses. So I'm not going to go into the income side of it. I'm really going to focus on what the overall budgets are at this point. The administration budget is 1.5 million. The police budget is 1.7 million. And you can look at the rest. Public Works obviously is a big chunk at 1.139 million. A significant portion of Public Works is paid from both the road fund and the from transfers from the road fund and from the sewer fund. The fire budget went down fairly significantly this year because there were two major leases that came off. They had 305,000 last year, but their ladder truck is now paid off, which brought that down by nearly $50,000. What's that? Yeah, our ladder truck, correct. So then the general fund total budget is 6,667,000. Moving on to the sewer fund. So just to give everybody an update, I didn't go into the income and expense because the income matches. The income you can go into more detail once we look at the actual numbers. But this is just the introduction, mind you. So this is really the broad overview of the budget. The sewer fund income, we are looking at a sewer increase again because Alcosan is raising their prices as they have every year for the last number of years and probably will for a few more moving forward. But that is a balanced budget there. We do have some grant money coming in. And we are pulling about $360,000 out of the reserve to cover this budget. And primarily it is for those construction costs that I talked about to make sure that we're getting, we have a well-funded reserve. So we're taking advantage of that by spending it on projects that could cost a lot more down the road. So we have the capital expense, we have the debt service for the fund itself. We have the operating expenses, but the biggest amount of it goes directly to Alcosan. And then I think, I mentioned 500,000 of that. So 1.4 million goes to Alcosan, 500,000 goes directly to construction costs. And then we are transferring 524,000 to the general fund, as I mentioned earlier, to cover public works, to cover engineering costs, and to cover our bond debt, which was primarily spent on, or not primarily, but in a large, maybe it is primarily or majority spent on sewer projects. The road fund, it is also balanced. It's 654,000. Capital expenses 25,000 for some repair of some equipment. Engineering cost 35,000 for the paving program, and then the paving program itself at 325. And then some miscellaneous repairs, 23,000, all under the road budget. And then we are transferring, we actually are transferring $9,000. I don't have on here because it was a small amount, $9,000 back to the road reserve. So there was a little bit extra I put in the reserve. And then we have the total expense is 650. Well, I'm sorry. Then we have the 250 that we're transferring to the general budget, primarily to cover public works work. And the work that they do, and then the total expense is 654 for 654,000. And then the bond fund budget. This one is a little tougher often to really budget in a given year because it's hard to tell when projects are going to start and when they're going to finish. But this is our best guess on when these things are going to happen. The income for this, we are, as I mentioned, we are getting significant interest. So we're going to have about $100,000 of additional interest on this. And this is if the fund averages $2 million. It currently has like $4.6 million in it. So that number could be larger depending on when bills come in. We are expected to receive about 3.8 million in grant reimbursements that we've already been awarded. And some of that is for projects that have actually already been completed. We just haven't seen the final grant money. We are going to transfer about $100,000 to the general fund for some capital investments that were needed. And then transfer from the bond reserve, which is really the main bond account, is 2.9 million to make the bond fund balance. And then we're looking at about most of the expenses going to be construction. You can see a list of the projects that are expected to happen in the new year, some of which will already start before the new year, like the pool bathhouse, which is starting next week, actually. But probably most of billing will happen in the new year. Public Works building, where Noble Park lighting work and some other revitalization of those two parks. And then Broadhead separation is, of course, the big project. We budgeted $4 million in 2024 for this project. But we're not sure exactly what part will be done and what part won't be. So that we'll update those as we get more information. And then for the bond portion of engineering is $338,000. All right, moving on to show you the updated capital improvement plan as well. Just so that you know, we are working on this. So we have now updated the capital plan for the capital improvement plan. So we have this going from now 2024 to 2028. We did change the police, and I worked with the chief on this so that they were getting a new vehicle every 3 years, but being that they have 4 vehicles, we thought it just made more sense to do it every 4. So we broke that out so that they're going to get a new vehicle every 4 years. And that's a good way for us to return we get a good return on those sales when we sell those cars. So the cars are ending up costing us about $35,000 once we've sold the used ones. We're adding one automobile recording device every year because that's about when they've needed to be replaced for the vehicles. And then we have 2 asks, one for hardware replacement program, and that's the laptops, and then we have body cams on another one. I'm sorry, then we have the bulletproof vests as well. Moving down this is where you'll see that the ladder truck came off. That's the $42,000 payment there. And then the Spartan Rescue vehicle still has 2 more years left for the fire department. And then we have the SCBA funding, the turnout gear that I was talking about. That's the part that goes into that additional fund. Or I'm sorry, that's not correct. This is not, I'd have to double check if this is the funding that goes into the extra reserve. I'll have to confer. Yes. Oh, no, I think good question. They might be. Yeah. They probably are. Yeah. So I'll have to double check on this. Clearly I have to, there's one mistake. So I'll confer and update. Right, okay. The government, this is for mainly public works. Similarly to the police, we now haven't quite gotten to a consistent program like they did, but we still have one truck that I mentioned, one dump truck that it was listed, and I realized I didn't update this number. This is actually now we've gotten a quote. This is 120. They've gone up significantly. So I'll address that. But our current vehicle is 12 years old. And this will be replacing that vehicle. So we will have then all vehicles will be less than 8 years old, and we'll be figuring out a schedule to rotate through them at that point. And you can see one other came off. The Freightliner came off this year as from a lease, and so did the number 107 truck came off, and the 108 truck are all coming off a lease this year. So we did have a little help with those leases falling off. And then a few other vehicles that some of them were budgeted for this year. They've already bought this zero turn. It was budgeted for this year, 2023. So the only thing we have additionally budgeted for them is the skid steer that I mentioned. And then we mentioned the vehicle up top. So that's really for public works for the next year. And then for code enforcement, we are looking in buying updated permit database. Our current database that we're using, Tracer, is just not being used very effectively, and frankly, it's not very user friendly, at least the way we've been looking at it. So we're looking at a solution that will integrate better with our website and eliminate a lot of double work in the borough office. So that's what that $15,000 is budgeted for. And then we also have down in the next one the website upgrade and or buying that software for tracking paving. So those are both the things that you're seeing there. That's what the budget is for. In Parks and Recreation, we have the trail feasibility study that we have not heard back whether we've gotten this or not. So we're waiting on to hear whether we're going to get that. The neighborhood park equipment replacement, this is for Linden and Steuben, or Linwood and Noble Parks. Thank you. And then we've been asked by someone on the rec board if we can put a water bottle filling station down at the park. So I put that in the budget, but that's one of the decision points council can make. Well, you can make all the points, but that's what I have listed for you. And then I also put on here the bathhouse roof because there were a lot of concerns about it initially. And so I just have it budgeted here in case we can find grant funding for solar or something else to put on that roof and have that paid for. So I put it in here as an option. The ones that are marked in this yellow are optional. Just putting in here. And then I also put $100,000 in here for if we wanted to do something about the fields and the drainage issue at the bottom of the park, not in 2024, but in 25.
Right. Are we able to put those onto placemat, onto the bond fund sheet?
Yeah, I just haven't done it because it's still optional. It wasn't committed or yeah, no, I know, but they weren't even, but we really haven't, I guess now it's proposed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
right,
I can put it on there as
on the second
proposed.
tab,
Yeah. Yep.
So that we don't lose track of them.
Yep.
On
Yep.
the engineering meeting side.
And so that's generally that for that improvements. And now for infrastructure improvements, this really, I didn't update this as much because I think this was done. This was done prior to the bond. This was initially created prior to the bond coming through. And so some of these things have been eliminated. And some of them have already been done, but I put in here the projects these are the ones that are marked in blue are the ones that are already a part of Broadhead. So we expect those are going to happen. The one that is in question is still the streetscaping at Crafton Boulevard. We haven't been able to obtain more significant funding for that. So we'll be looking for that. That's what that is there. And then some of these other full road construction projects that have not happened. Oregon, and Emerson. And so those I didn't put those for consideration this year, but maybe in the future, that's something that council would want to consider. And then combined sewer projects. I don't think I updated this one because this is mostly already separation and bond fund projects. I did put in Duncan Story as a project down by, that we might actually have grant funding for, so I put it in here as a budget item. And then we are looking at the last area that the borough needs to separate from a consent decree point of view is C20. And we are anticipating that we might actually be able to get away with not having $1 million project. So we're spending money in 2024 to explore options. But I put in that it might cost $1 million in 2025, but that's the last step in the separation projects. Moving out. And again, these obviously you can see I didn't go out much beyond 2025 because we really haven't discussed this. So I wanted to make sure that we all discuss it and we can figure out what to do moving forward. Okay, with that being said, let me go back to the presentation. And these are generally the points that are in the budget right now that are decisions for council and or anything else that council wants to dig into. I put these up. The ones that are marked in black are already in the budget and balanced. So you really don't have to do anything to say yes, they are in there. If you don't want them in there for some reason and we want to spend money on something else, we can also consider that. But these are what's that? Oh, I thought you asked them. So just so you know, that's where these are at. And I can go through some of them. The restrooms in the municipal building are atrocious. They don't work. They smell. It's actually embarrassing, in my opinion, to have people come in there. I don't typically let people go in them. And so we'd like money for that. That we will do that in-house. That will be done by the public works crew. And we're going to change it from 2 restrooms to 1. So it's ADA compliant and it's larger. It'll be like a family restroom. That's the idea behind that one. 3 bottle filling stations. Currently we rent these water bottle systems where we have to pay on a monthly basis to have more water sent to us. So I would like to put in water bottle filling stations in each one of the in the police station, upstairs in the admin, and over here in the community center. And ultimately they might not save us money in the first year, but by the second or third year they will certainly be saving us money because we won't be renting those bottles anymore. And then I've gotten quotes for the carpet in the admin and council chambers. That would be doing and I know this was budgeted last year and we did the carpeting in the police station, but we have not yet done the carpeting in the admin or council chambers. And both of those need to be done. Carpet for the library, library requested that we do the carpet. I guess they haven't had a new carpet in more than 12 years and starting to look ratty. So they would like we got that quote for $13,000. Cigarette butt containers around the parks. That was a request by a few people. New garbage cans. This is based on Shabum's analysis of dilapidated equipment that we have around. And one of the things is some of our trash cans are they need to be replaced. And then the last thing on the municipal properties list there is a meeting room reservation. For those of you who don't know, we have 2 meeting rooms over here that are never used because they're basically used currently as storage for historical society inventory that came from the historical society. So I would like to do a little renovation on those 2 rooms so that we can have a split divider between them, and I can rent one out or rent them both out actually as meeting rooms for people that are interested. And then we will secure I've been talking to the library so that we will have an opportunity for people to actually come up and view the assets that we have from the historical society on a periodic basis. Maybe 1 or 2 days a week from noon to 5, someone could come in and view those if they would so desire.
Yeah, just as a point, those archives belong to the library. They're not borough property.
Right. And we've discussed that with the library as well. So that is why we want money for that renovation so that we can have those in and actually start making money off them. And so the municipal property total is 44,000. And then over to police, we talked about this a little bit, a new cruiser, laptops, the police chief CERS, bulletproof vests are all in there. And those have all they're on the budget right now. And so if we leave them on, it'll be balanced. And then the parks, the water bottle filling station, that I mentioned earlier. And then we've also been asked about and I've looked into, I haven't been asked by Crafton Performing Arts. They've asked to work with us on it. And so I put it on the budget and we are having forward conversations with them. We're going to also be, I'm working with them on the MOU. So forwarding a memorandum of understanding for the stage before we move forward, but I don't have a resolution of that yet. But we're working on it. So that's where we are with the initial decisions. A couple more decisions that are in there. I mentioned dump truck 109. That'll be the last dump truck, and that dump truck is in pretty sad shape and does require quite a bit of repairs. That's 12 years old. And that's the last one we're looking to replace. And I mentioned the skid steer. That's the net that it would cost. That's with $25,000 back for our current skid steer. But this is changing from a 4-wheel skid steer to a track skid steer. So it's much more usable by the public works. And it's something that they're interested in. It'll help them when they have to mow the trails and do paving work. And then two next things, the street signs I'll mention first. We do have it already budgeted at 15,000. I'm waiting to get back a quote for what. So we have several of our decorative street signs around town that need to be replaced, and they are more expensive. I don't know exactly what they're going to cost yet. So I put it on there as a placeholder. So it is budgeted for 15, not 25, but I anticipate it being higher than 15 currently. And then I put on a front loader too, and this is really the high level wish list of Public Works. Obviously, that's a big budget piece. We have had a discussion. I did discuss briefly with the manager of Carnegie about sharing some items, like possibly because they're also interested in getting a front loader, so we could possibly share some of this expense with them. And we've also talked about they own their own Vector truck, which we do not own. We usually borrow ours from the COG, and we have to pay on a daily basis when we borrow it from the COG. And then you have to schedule it months in advance. And sometimes that's difficult when you're talking about, you have an emergency sewer that needs to be vacked out. So we're looking into options. Right now, we actually use our street sweeper as a vac because it has a similar system to a Vector truck. So they can actually use a street sweeper to vac, but I would like to sell our street sweeper and buy a smaller street sweeper that's more efficient and does not require CDL drivers. Currently, our street sweeper requires CDL drivers, which means that only 2 people on our public works, including the foreman, can drive it, which limits the amount of time that we can have it out on the street. So we're looking at the option of doing that. And then if we do that, and then we have to work with Carnegie on a Vector truck, maybe there's some deal we could work out with a front loader, but that hasn't been figured out yet. So I just wanted to throw it out there as a possibility as we navigate how we could possibly help Public Works out. The biggest thing that they use that for would use a street and would significantly cut down the time that they spend on rotating the compost, which we get quite a bit of. One of our most popular programs, hands down, is our wood chipper program. We have every week significant number of people using the wood chipper program. And then the other decision, the library has asked us for an annual increase. They've proposed an annual 3% increase. They have not seen an increase for 3 years, I think, or 4 years. I forget the exact number.
They had an increase last year.
Was it last? Okay, maybe it was last.
It was last year they had an increase.
Okay, my apologies. Then
Yeah.
I'll double check, but they were asking for a regular one. So I put it out there. I have not budgeted that yet. That's up to the borough to decide. And then I also wanted to mention, which I forgot to put up here, I wanted to put up the other thing that we could ask for an increase was from Thornburg. Thornburg we have not had, so they pay us an annual fee for the use of our police department. Our costs have gone up about 12% since the last time we upped theirs. So I'd like us to consider possibly asking them for an increase. I think I don't have the number right in front of me, but I think it's 104,000 is what they pay now, which is, yeah, I'm sorry, what's that? Okay, yeah, I think that's what it is. And then, so anyway, there's that ask. But that is the overview of the budget with 6 minutes to go before a meeting goes. I can hand out all the details. I just didn't want everybody to be staring at the details when I was going over all of the other stuff. but I have all the funds in a draft form, so you can take and look at a paper copy and dig into it before we have our next meeting, when we can get into some of these decisions.
So the action item for council for the next meeting is to review these items and be planned for discussion.
Correct,
on some of these.
correct. And I timed an email to go out at 6:30 to all of you with those documents, so you already have them.
Yeah.
So. All right. So with that being said,
Does
Yep.
council have any questions? Well, Jim, this was a wonderful job in putting all of this together. I know there's a lot of work. The finance committee was involved in it too, and the amount of details and information is heads and tails above prior years related to the budgeting side. So,
Yeah, I would like to also give my kudos. This has probably been this has been the best introduction to budgeting season in all the years that I've been involved with council or mayor.
Mhm.
So what I'm seeing here is a real shift from tactical to strategic,
Mhm.
and I'm very impressed with it.
And again, the goal with this budget is there's no tax increase. So real estate tax increase. So that is one of the goals. So I know it's a lot of materials to review, but we have that obligation to do. So if it's easier to take a paper copy or look online before our next meeting, so we're ready for some discussion. We do have, I believe, 4 other meetings scheduled. And in the past, we've been able to cancel 1 or 2 of those meetings towards the end. So that could be the possibility if we're able to review this.
So one quick question. I mean, I'm used to looking at these big massive spreadsheets every
Yeah.
month. So are we going to be posting the draft budget for the public to review, since we're doing these public workshops? If they wanted to see it?
yeah, I wanted to do it in the new format, because I don't want people to get confused by the old numbering system and all that confusion. But I can certainly post this. I mean, it's not, it can be for public consumption. So yeah.
And I know we're running out of time. You had mentioned that we have to dip into the reserves a little bit this coming year. Do we,
Just for the sewer fund, yeah.
just for the sewer fund? Do we plan on budgeting, maybe not next year, but the year, like, would the plan be to budget the year after to try to rehydrate that for what we've taken out?
Probably not in the first year after that, because we have a significant backlog of programs, and we do have about I think we have about $1 million in the sewer fund. So we do have a little room there. We'll have to look at it next year, but the anticipation is to probably spend a little bit more again, but then start refilling it after that. So once we get through those problem child projects, so we don't have more Matt Grinder projects, where, yeah, right. So,
And the expenses associated with Johnston Street and the sewers blew up. And that was for years of non-maintenance on those lines. And that depleted a lot of the sewer fund.
I guess one last thing, these spreadsheets are huge, and I appreciate the highlights and the insights and the decision points that were brought up, because a lot of this minutia is stuff that we can't really change. Really, right? We got to keep the lights on, we got to pay the electric bill, we got to pay the salaries out. So I appreciate the highlights.
And the other one is the placemat. So the placemat, which is the bond sheet, of course, for all the projects, extremely detailed down to what's paid for by grants, bonds, and the proposed projects too. So this is a really strong snapshot of all the projects and the finances going on in the borough. And this has been years in the making. Yes, to get to this point. We can.
I just feel like you've taken it over the finish line.
good, because I'm not there yet, but I'm glad you guys think that.
He's still running with the baton. Okay, so we will end the budget meeting at 7:14. And we will